Hello, thank you, Oleg. So I'm here to tell you guys how to navigate a test assignment. So test assignments are different recruitment processes. So let's go into the topic of today. And yeah, first just a little bit about myself. So yes, the name is Tuuli, and some of you might have seen me in previous events as well. And I've been in the games industry for over 8 years in different types of studios, everywhere from AAA to now a startup. So we're growing a very interesting team at Dazzle Rocks, and we're building a social sandbox MMO. So yeah, I've had experience from a bunch of different things, everything from recruiting to relocations and much more. So definitely done a fair bit of test assignments during my day as well. So yeah. But before I go into sort of like how to survive a test assignment, it's maybe good to recap what actually are test assignments and why do companies tend to actually do them in the first place. So basically, test assignments are a way to measure your skills and abilities in order for the company to make a more informed hiring decision. And interviews are always subjective because not the whole company is interviewing you. There's only maybe a one or two people there. So test assignments can also be a much more subject or an objective way to get kind of information to assess candidates and sort of get a well-rounded picture of the candidate themselves. And sometimes test assignments can also save some time for companies as well. And when do test assignments actually then happen? So, whenever there is a large amount of candidates expected to apply for a certain position, usually companies sometimes tend to do test assignments right at the start of the process. So, when you actually send in your application, you might be asked to maybe do a code test right at the beginning. It can be very short in some cases, but in some cases it can take a bit more time as well. And then sometimes companies will also ask you to do a test assignment once your application has already been reviewed and you've kind of gotten already to the next step in the process. And basically, well, the tests can happen nearly in every part of the recruitment process in general. So it can happen during the first interview, after the first interview, after the second interview, maybe right before you get an offer. So it's really kind of up to the company on how they've designed their recruitment process. And test assignments are also interesting in the fact that they can also happen during an interview. But I'm going to go a little bit more into that a little bit later. Now, there are mainly three different types of categories of test assignments. So the first one basically measures more of your hard skills and abilities. Let's say, like, how well can you code with a certain what are your design skills like? Then the second category measures more of your soft skills, your behavior, your personality, for example, and your culture fit in general. And then there are some other tests that are a little bit more sort of not maybe as usual in the games industry. These can include things like drug tests or physical aptitude tests. But today, I'm mainly going to be focusing, or actually only going to be focusing on the hard skills and the soft skills tests, because the other category in the games industry is not that common, I would say. So basically, test assignments, as I mentioned before, they measure a specific skills and abilities that you might have that are needed for the job that you're applying for. And they can either be standardized. So let's say that, for example, IQ tests are usually standardized, or they can be just job or even role specific. And as mentioned before, they can also happen in interviews. And now, obviously, with everyone having the experience probably from working remotely over the past 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic, test assignments can happen both on or off site. So it really kind of depends. They can also happen in groups, or then you might be asked to do one alone. I would say that usually the individual tests are more common, but I have also seen quite a lot of group tests done in certain situations as well. And the time scale can be very varied. Sometimes it can take 10 minutes. Sometimes the longer tests can take up to 2+ days. I think the longest sort of testing I have seen has been around 3 days, but that's like very unusual, I would say. And then there are some examples of different types of skills tests. So in the soft skills tests side, personality tests are quite common. Usually they include an interview afterwards as well. And then if the company or companies might also do these kind of culture fit attribute tests. So let's say that a company has certain values that um, they really kind of find super important to test during the recruitment process whether this candidate actually sort of is or behaves according to the values that the company has. They might do some type of culture fit attribute tests during the recruitment process. And then, as mentioned, the group tests are also something that usually measures soft skills. So, a classic one is that you're put into a group and asked to come up with a plan on how to escape a deserted island, for example. So, that would measure your collaboration skills. And then they can also be interview questions, as mentioned before. So this could be a themed question. Let's say that you're applying for a leadership position and you might be asked, like, well, what if you would have a situation where you have two of your team members who have really like big differences of opinion between themselves, and it's kind of affecting the rest of the team negatively? What would you do in that situation to solve the situation to be better? And then some examples of hard skills tests. So as mentioned, sometimes it's not super common, but sometimes some companies do IQ tests or some kind of logical thinking and maths tests, but not super common, I would say. In some cases, I've seen that in some positions as well. I would say that the most common tests for the hard skills in the games industry are more sort of job related tests, such as code tests or providing like a work sample. Let's say that you might be asked to do a concept as an artist for a certain type of a game. So that might be a way to test your. And then also these can be interview questions as well. So Google famously has some very obscure interview questions. I think one of them was like, how many ping pong balls can you fit into a plane? So this basically measures your problem solving skills and sort of your thinking in a very sort of pressurized environment when you're in an interview. And then when you actually get into the test assignment, I usually tend to see this type of a situation happen a lot. So you start panicking, you start thinking, oh my God, I don't have enough time. Where do I start? I'm scared to make mistakes because I really want this job and I don't know the answer to this question. What do I do? So, what's the answer in this situation? And I've made a couple of sort of different models for you to maybe follow to get that anxiety down a little bit during the test assignment and feel like you have a bit more control during the process. So basically what the process is that if you have the possibility, you can prepare for the test assignment. If you know that there is, for example, a code test process, you can practice beforehand. And yeah, it's easy for me to say that don't panic, but breathe, it's going to be okay. And understand the brief. Is it clear for you what the purpose of the test is? What is the company trying to measure with the test itself? And don't be afraid to ask from the company if you don't necessarily understand, what are they trying to look for? What type of what are they trying to measure, to ask questions and clarify the brief so that you understand what you're supposed to be doing. And then final checks before you actually submit your work. So check it before you submit. For example, if you have a series of questions, check that you've answered all of the questions. Check that you're not making any sort of like, on the fly mistakes or anything like that. And obviously return your assignment on time and reflect what went well, what was hard, what was easy, what can I do better next time. And then I have this kind of like 5-star model for success. So show that you understand the company. The more you're aligned with the company's vision, with the company's culture, with the company's strategy, if you understand the company, it's going to be easier for you to figure out what they might be looking for. And obviously, this might be hard if you're just doing a standardized code test. There is only one correct answer in certain tests. So obviously, it's a bit different from test to test. Um, and then show your motivation. There are also situations where I have heard people declining to do a test assignment because they might not be that interested in the actual position. And that can sometimes lead to a situation where they get disqualified for the position and the company doesn't continue the recruitment process. Your motivation by actually doing the test assignment and by putting in the work. And then divide and conquer. Sometimes the test assignments can be massive. They can consist of multiple different parts. So it might be easier for you to break it up into smaller parts and start maybe with the easier stuff first or the harder stuff, depending on your style. And obviously, as I said before, show your motivation, do the test assignment, but also don't overcommit. If you do too much, it can set the wrong expectations for the company itself because they'll be expecting you to deliver that kind of work when you actually start in the company if you happen to get the job. So also be realistic with the test assignment. Don't overdo it either. And do it yourself. I mean, they're measuring your skills, not anyone else's. So it's okay, to maybe talk about it later with a friend and maybe reflect on what can I do better and stuff like that. But do the test assignment yourself. It's meant for you. And then a couple of really common questions. So this is something that I get a lot. So why do I need to do a test assignment on top of everything else? I've had like 4 interviews and I've had to like go on site and I've had to do this and that during the interview process. Does it really matter that I need to do a test assignment? Now, good test assignments are fit for purpose. I think it would be, in some cases, overkill to do a test assignment, maybe for a programmer who's been in the industry for 20 years, has proven track record of completed projects, maybe has even already sent a code sample to the company to review. I think in that case, it might be a bit overkill to do a standardized code test at that point. Um, but it really kind of depends. And so that usually, especially with soft skills and culture fit related things, they are much harder to assess. So in those types of situations, yes, sometimes the test assignments really are fit for purpose, and I would say that most times companies really do think about why they need to do them. So they're trying to just make an informed recruitment decision. And then, how much do test assignments actually affect the final hiring decision? They will never be the only thing that companies look at, unless it's a situation where they only ask for a large group of people to do a test assignment at the start without seeing anyone's CVs or anything else. That's the only place where they might do decisions just based on the test assignment and only take the people who do the best in to the next phase. But it's rarely the only thing that affects the decision. So I would say that if you do sort of like fairly well in the test assignment, you're maybe in sort of the middle bracket as a coder, but then you're a really great culture fit to the company, you still might get hired. So it really kind of depends, but it's only just one tool for the recruiters and the hiring team in order to make that informed decision. Now, I also wanted to leave some time at the end here for so I'm very happy to happy to answer any questions that that participants might have. So yeah, let's see. Uh, uh, uh. Mustafa has asked, let's say you have a CV from a programmer, what makes you say, oh, this person doesn't need to take a 2-day test? So that really depends. So basically, I would say that if from the CV we can't
Yes, Tuuli.
really get like a clear answer of what this person has specifically done, for example, in previous projects, or we want to measure a specific type of a skill that we can't necessarily immediately tell that this person has or that this person is very strong at, that's usually a point where companies might decide to do a test assignment. And as mentioned, rarely are the test assignments very long. I would say that most companies do agree that they also need to respect the candidate's time as well. So rarely are they very long. But yeah, it really depends. But I would say that if the company doesn't have a clear idea of a certain skill that they really need for the role that you're applying to, then they might do a test just to get that confirmation on whether this person is actually able to do the job that they're applying to. And then Rachel Chen asks, during an art test I had, I was afraid to ask further questions about the instructions because I was afraid I would come across as not good at interpreting instructions. Was I overthinking? So I would say that it's always good to confirm if, especially like at the start, if you read through the brief and you're not maybe quite sure. Sometimes there might be a situation that the brief looks very clear to the company itself, but then to candidates, it might be like, oh, not super clear. So there might be those situations. I think it's fine, especially like if you have 1 or 2 questions, but suddenly if you have 10, 20 questions about the assignment, then you're probably going too far at that point. But yeah, it's totally fine to ask at the start, and I think like most companies would see it as just normal if people have a few questions to ask at the start. And I understand that it can sometimes feel like, oh, I'm overthinking it, or do I seem like I'm not smart enough for this job if I ask questions and so on. But it's okay to ask questions, I would say, in the beginning. And then Joshua Cabrera, thank you for your question as well. Is it okay to say no to a technical test if the test looks like something the company will use? When can we ask for a fee for a technical test that a company could potentially use? Now, that's a really good question. So basically, rarely do companies actually end up using the actual content of the test for like project purposes. Rarely does that happen, or I've actually never seen that happen in companies where I've been. And I have also seen some cases where if a person has been asked to do a very long test, that they have asked for compensation, or they have been offered actually a compensation for the duration of the test, if it is a very sort of in-depth thing. But I would say that in some cases, especially if you're applying to smaller companies, um, it if you start asking for a fee for a test that maybe lasts max a day, it can get you disqualified from the recruitment process, because it can come off sometimes to the company that you're not motivated enough to put in the work, but that you're actually sort of asking to get paid without sort of having shown your propensity enough to the company yet. So it can, in some cases, get you disqualified for the position. But it really depends on the company. But I would say that if the test is very long, there is a chance that companies do also offer compensation for actually completing the test as well. Yeah, I think we're also nearing the end of my time. I think I can take one more question here. And also after the session, I'll be available on chat in Pine. So if you guys have any more questions that you'd like to ask me there, I'm happy to answer. So then, Lenny Smith, I think you have a really good question here. Would you say that the test assignments are typically tied to what everyday tasks are like at a given company? Thanks for the talk. Thank you for listening in. So it depends. I would say that most times the test assignment should be measuring what you would be doing mostly day to day in the company. So obviously, it would be a bit weird for them to measure something that would not have anything to do with your job. It doesn't necessarily mean that the job itself would be directly the test assignment style things every day, but I think that it still should contain at least sort of like main big parts of the type of job that you'll be with standardized code tests where you have like ABC answers or something like that. Obviously, that's not what a programmer's job looks like day to day. So, but yeah, I would still say that the tests do measure the skills that you'll be utilizing during your work every day. So, yeah. But I think that's our time for this time. Yeah, happy. I have so many questions here. Thank you guys, and I'm really sorry that we don't have enough time
Totally,
to
totally.
answer
We
all of
do
these.
we do have still we still
Okay,
can take
great.
a couple questions. Yeah, we
All
still
right,
like
great, awesome. All right, and then let's see here. Uh, then there's, for example, Clara de Valls asks, how much is research by the candidate valued during the test? So, for example, I have seen tests where people have actually put in references. So they have, for example, like put in maybe like book references or read some articles or stuff like that. I think that's fine to do, but also, I think the tests themselves, they do measure what you can do day to day, how you can apply that theoretical information into the real life. And I think that's the main point. That if you're only bringing in theory and not the actual application of the theory in your work, I think that can also be something that companies might in some positions look favorably on if you're applying for a more sort of research and development based position. But if you're actually coming to do a job where you have to actually focus on execution of work, then doing an only research based test assignment is not necessarily the best thing. But including the research plus the actual execution of the task might be a great thing as well. So yeah. And then let's see here. Um, Alexandria Whitehouse asks, when taking a test assignment and there's no person there in person or on a call with you, but they record the keystrokes and mouse movements, is it always important to complete the assignment in a way that it works? Or is it mainly a matter of seeing how you think through a challenge and that you at least tried? Now, that's a really, really good question. I think, in those kind of tests, it's also, I think the companies look at both sort of the data that they get from the actual test, but they also look at the final product as well. And I think especially with code tests such as this, it also I think companies also look at uh, sort of the quality of the work. So for example, especially with code, sometimes stuff might look beautiful on screen, but what's behind it can be really, really messy. And I think that's why the company usually looks at sort of both sides of the test, both sort of the analytics and the data, plus the actual final product in those cases. But I would say that your problem solving skills at the end of the day, and there might be various creative ways of solving different problems. And I would say that only with standardized tests are there sort of like more right answers in a way, but most test assignments don't just have one right answer, but there's multiple different ways of doing it. And then Taisto Saromäki asks, can you give an example of how much time is usually given for completing test assignments? This is a good one. This probably depends on the company itself, but a lot, but many, maybe you can give some insights from personal experience. Yeah, that's a really good one. So I've seen this done in a couple of different ways. So most companies tend to give the candidate the opportunity to say when they have the time to actually complete the test. Sometimes there might be situations, especially if it's a bigger company, they might have a certain time set aside. For example, we only do the tests on Thursdays and Fridays from 4 p.m. onwards, or something like that, and then you have to sort of conform with that schedule. But most often, recruiters ask the candidates themselves that, hey, we would like you to complete a test assignment for you. Usually, candidates tend to, complete this assignment in a day or so. When would be the best time for you to complete the test? So then the sort of ball is in your court at that point to give them the appropriate schedule for yourself to complete the test. But it really depends. I've also actually seen a test where a group of people was flown into another country for 3 days to do the test. And actually, like, well, obviously, in that point, you need to be able to do it according to the company schedule because they're flying this group out specifically for that test. So that's kind of that's a very sort of special situation, but I've also seen that done as well.
One more question, Tuli. We have 2 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Then let's see. Mhm. Let's see if I can find a banger last question here. Christian Kata asks if you feel like you haven't done as well as you could have for a test, is it all right to request for a second one? So, oftentimes, this doesn't really happen because the test itself also kind of measures your ability to sort of work under pressure as well. So oftentimes companies don't tend to give second options, at least during the same recruitment process. But what I have seen happen in some cases is that maybe during the first recruitment process that the candidate has seen through, they have maybe failed a test assignment and maybe not done that well in an interview, and then they get rejected from that position. But then the candidate has decided to apply again at a later date, maybe to a similar type of a position. And because they know the company, they've been through the interview process and the test assignments before, it's easier for them to sort of feel a bit calmer in that situation. And I've actually seen those candidates actually getting hired at the end of the second process. So that has also been quite normal in the industry as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tuli. Thank you for the excellent session. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And yeah, as mentioned, I'm happy to answer any questions in chat. My answers might be a bit delayed, so I might not answer within the but still very excited to be here. Hope you guys have a wonderful event, and thanks for attending my chat. So.